Welcome to another episode of the Trusted Advisor podcast and video series powered by the Retail Solutions Providers Association. Our goal on the pod is to accelerate the success of today's and tomorrow's leaders in the retail IT industry. I'm Jim Roddy, back with you again. Thank you so much for joining us. As always, we talk with leaders in the retail IT channel about their leadership journeys, what they've learned along the way, and what you can learn from them. In this episode, we'll talk with Dan Brattland of COCARD Marketing Group. COCARD has over 100 member resellers nationwide, generating more than $11 billion in annual volume. Dan has over 20 years experience in the integrated payments and hospitality technology industry. He's a frequent speaker at industry events, including RSPA's own Retail Now and the Inspire Leadership Conference. Dan, welcome back to the Trusted Advisor.
Well, it's really glad to be back here, Jim. Good to see you again.
Good to see you. So this is Dan's fourth appearance, and we don't share all the details and stats, but Dan is one of the download leaders, the YouTube view leaders on the spot. Wow. So we're glad to have you here. Just so you know, if you come back for a fifth time, we give you a royal blue RSPA smoking jacket.
Wow.
To wear on
well,
the podcast.
I would love to have one of those. Kind of like the green jacket at the Masters, I guess.
Very much. Though some people say this is more prestigious than a green jacket at the Masters.
For sure.
Excellent. Well, I'm so glad to talk to you as always. And our conversation today is going to focus on communication in the context of leadership. And before I get to my first question, I'm going to pump you up a little bit here. So you just spoke. We're recording this 3 weeks after Retail Now 2025, where you spoke again. And so here's some words that folks use to describe you, Dan, as a speaker that I've heard. All right. Engaging, insightful, relatable, clear, memorable. I was going to slip fascinating in there, but people who know you and have seen you speak fascinating means like, what in the heck is going on? So again, you're, a very good speaker. That's not just my view. That's the view of our members. I'm curious if you can share with our audience, how did you develop your communication skills? So like, what were the original building blocks? And then also, what do you do today to keep your communication skills sharp?
Well, that's a great question. I think I was somewhat blessed coming out of the womb of being a communicator. Some of us just have this ability. I was never afraid to speak in front of people, even in grade school. I was sort of the class clown.
Okay.
I wasn't afraid to get up in front and talk and be the center of attention. So I did have one of those natural God-gifted things, but that in itself can also be a double-edged sword. When you are a over communicator, like I felt I could have been, I got in trouble a lot. I was in the principal's office and things like that. It can get you into binds, and you often then find yourself talking over people. As I get older in high school, maybe interrupting people mid-sentence, trying to top their story. Like, we always run into these communicators that you're telling the story or telling a joke, and right when you finish, they can't wait to tell you their story or their joke. I call them toppers, and so I wouldn't call myself an effective communicator. It wasn't until I got into personal and professional development, which was my first sort of business coming out of high school. I promoted speakers, trainers. I sold tickets, and I started listening to a lot of this stuff. And my first book I read on communication skills was actually a leadership book. It was called The 1 Minute Manager, Ken Blanchard. Mm-hmm. And what I learned was effective communicators aren't big talkers. They're actually effective listeners. So I had to go from a overly fast thinking. I had some issues like ADD and stuff. So I was always thinking ahead and wanting to talk fast, like I'm talking now, obviously. But I had to slow down and actually become an effective listener. And that really changed, I think, how I came across to others. And as I developed my business and taking on more leadership roles, I took pride in not just being a good talker, but communication is a two-way street. And I really had to become an effective communicator, thus becoming an effective listener. And I basically learned some of these techniques, like the 1 Minute Manager. One of the things I learned is, reprimand in private, appraise in public. That was just a simple thing that sticks with me today as I lead and communicate. Nito Kubin was another mentor of mine. He had a book on how to be a great communicator. So another book, obviously, How to Win Friends and Influence People, was probably one of the biggest impactful books that I ever read of Dale Carnegie. Um, and really going and diving into the material that's out there. And I just named a few things that were out there back in the 1980s, you know.
Hmm.
I'm sure there's plenty of stuff out there. So I would always encourage people, and I got that foundation at a young age, especially if you're listening to this, whether you're 20 or 50, it's never too late to pick up some information and learn how to become an effective communicator, not just a good communicator, but an effective, which encompasses listening skills.
Yeah,
So I was
very well.
fortunate how to build that foundation at a young age, which helped me throughout my career.
Yeah, so it sounds like you had the natural ability to use some of those educational resources to channel it. One thing, like you mentioned, the 1 minute manager, there's a lot in there about being clear and being succinct, right? If you say 1,000 words and you think they're the greatest words, they could get lost. But if you're able to really hone that down. So Dan, what do you do today? Right, that was early. Now you're a skilled, communicator. You're getting pats on the back. You've had a lot of success. What do you do today to make sure that you stay sharp as a communicator and as a leader?
Well, I would say the good thing about keeping your skills sharp when it comes to communication is that we have the opportunity to practice, not just in the workplace, but in at home. You know, as my kids develop from, being having to have to communicate them in their adolescent ages, in school, then when they're adults, I have 4 adult children now in their 20s. So your communication styles need to change as you communicate. So I have an opportunity to practice in the office and practice my communication skills at home and how you communicate. Because what I found is effective communicators in a leadership role in business tend to be effective communicators as parents or let's say coaches. And so I take the opportunity outside of the workplace every day to say, am I listening? How am I taking in information? Effective communicators don't react, and we have so many opportunities to react to whatever situation, knee jerk, and breathe and take information in and look for, like I say, look for the good, or, use that word fascination instead of frustration. So I have an opportunity to practice those because you communicate how you feel and you can't fake it. So if I feel frustrated, I'm not a very good communicator. And so I
Yes.
practice these things like that word fascination versus frustration in my brain. Whenever I feel frustrated, I just say, well, fascinated, fascinated. And it just gives me a different perspective and allows me to take in information and be a listener. So we all have the ability to practice and perfect our communication skills each and every day.
That's right. That's right. And so talk about how do you teach again others in your organization, other leaders, your kids, right, to communicate effectively, but do it in their own style, right? Anybody like I'm smiling as I'm listening to you, Dan, right? Because you and I I've been seeing you speak over the years and you have your own unique style to it. But if I would get up there in front of everybody and start talking exactly like you did. Hey, let me tell you about frustration versus fascination. They'd be like, you're just ripping off Dan Brattland. So, how do you train people on communication best practices without having them just be a carbon copy of you?
I basically tell them or train them or explain that don't try to be me, don't try to be somebody else. You have to be true to yourself because effective communicators come in all different shapes and sizes. If you look at coaching styles, you like sports, you
Hmm.
have the coach that is, so they call them a player's coach. They're a big talker, communicator. Then you have these coaches that don't say a lot of words, but how are they able to get results and they're just not big talkers. But what they have is respect. They have respect from other people because once you go outside of your own comfort and try to be somebody you're not, you then become a phony. And people read phony leaders. If they're one way in public, let's say they're one way at the office, but at home they're a different way, or they're one way out. Effective communicators are basically transparent. and they are transparent to the effect where you just need to be who you are, and people will respond to that. If you're not a big talker, fast talker, you don't have to be. You just have to be an effective listener and being able to coach somebody. So, and that as a leader, you do have to also understand that there are people around you that like to be led in a different manner. So you do sometimes have to communicate differently with each individual, let's say on your team. A good coach would know what motivates this player, maybe discipline, talking in a certain way, versus this player that needs a lot of appraisal, a lot of encouragement. So have the ability to adapt your communication, but keep your style true to yourself. Don't try to be somebody you're not.
Yeah, I'm actually reading a book right now on Phil Jackson, the legendary Bulls and Lakers coach. He won, 11 NBA titles as a coach. And as I'm reading him, I'm like, wow, he is way different from your normal coach. He's way more hands off and let's all be a harmonious ecosystem. He's not so much a screamer and yeller. And I'm like, yes, I resonate with that. But then the way that he does it is like, I have incense at our first meeting and we talk about like the Lakota tribe. I'm thinking, I couldn't do that. Like, I'm not sure what that is. So it sounds like you have, like, I share the outcome with him, but I wouldn't, as a basketball coach or as a leader in any way, try to follow that, or else it would look really phony. Is that kind of what you're saying? Like the outcomes can be the same, but everybody has to find their own unique path and stay true to yourself in order to get to that unique path, if I'm understanding what you're saying.
Absolutely. And the other trait I try to pass on is as you take more of a leadership role or management and leading other people, is to always take responsibility. And what I mean by responsibility is if somebody in my organization isn't doing something that I think they should be doing the right way, I always ask, what's the question behind the question? The question behind the question is, what have I done to not communicate properly to that person, whether it be training, when I interviewed them, did I not ask the right questions to understand they knew the role that they were in? When you always put good communicators and good leaders, always puts the burden on their shoulders and never places blame on anybody else.
Yeah.
It's always what can I do, or what didn't I do? What could I have done differently? What did I learn from this? And maybe I didn't explain to this, and maybe I didn't give you enough training. So I understand this didn't, you didn't do this, or you didn't do that, or this customer said this and this customer said, so let's sit down because it's my, I take responsibility for making sure that you have enough knowledge and training so that this doesn't happen again. So we can't have this happen again. So I think taking responsibility is critical.
Yeah, the first question, instead of what's wrong with that, no good, low down, whatever, it's what am I doing to potentially cause this behavior? So, all right. So Dan, I'm going to encourage you to be a topper here, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you one of my biggest communication mistakes ever that, I'd be honest with you, I've never ever shared publicly. And then what I learned from it, and I'm hoping you can do the same. So you okay with that? I'll go first and then you can go. All right. So this is back, I was 22 years old. I was going to college. I was actually playing college basketball. I was also working for the local pro basketball team as well. It was called the Erie Wave. Folks on YouTube might be able to see over my shoulder the Erie Wave uniform back there. So I was the PR director back then. And so a local high school team had their sports banquet. They wanted a player or coaches to come out and speak. Well, the players weren't in town yet. So the general manager said, hey, we'll have the coach and some of the staff come out and speak. So he had me go out there and, be one of the speakers. And I was talking about the importance of doing your best versus just winning. And so I worked in an anecdote and I said, we're playing this team, District of Columbia. They were awful. They were like 3-23, just like a brutal, terrible team. Well, as I was saying that, I noticed, kids, instead of looking, they're starting to look up and look around. And I thought, well, I guess everybody's paying attention. But I said, we won the game. We didn't play our best. And then we get done with the speakers. Everybody gets up there to give their awards. The boys coach gets up there and he says, well, Jim, I want you to know our season, we were 3-23, but we were not awful. And I just remember sitting there, like even telling you right now, Dan, like, like my nerves are going. I was sweating, sitting. I just wanted to crawl under the table. I just wanted to disappear. I was like, this thing cannot end. I couldn't get out there soon enough. But what that taught me is do your research before you go in. And I probably over prepare now when I'm, communicating to make sure I find out more details because man, did I step in it and I like thought I don't want to ever go and speak again whatsoever. So again, that is the first time I've ever publicly shared that story. That was 1992. And so that tells you I am still scarred from doing that. So that leads me to Dan. Can you share a communication mistake that you made and what you learned from it, please?
Well, I'm not going to go. In fact, I won't go that far back, but and I'll just do something. I just came to mind here recently this last week.
Okay.
We had in a real life situation. We had one of our largest accounts. We were moving them to a new processing relationship, and my gal who has the clients, a fairly large client, we're moving over with one of our largest banks. And it all has to do with underwriting. It's kind of a high ticket. I'm not going to go into detail, but we send it to this new relationship and they come back, say, oh, we can't get it approved. We need this, financials and everything else. And I knew they had another relationship with a company that could get it approved. And I said, well, why don't we can you get it approved through what is called their resale channel? But I didn't ask enough questions. I didn't communicate it. They just said, well, let's give it a try. And it got approved. And lo and behold, I thought it was over. Well, I get a notice yesterday saying, that there's a security hold. It's $130,000. This merchant hasn't been paid for 2 weeks. They got $130,000. I'm like, what happened?
Right.
Why would we do this? Well, you didn't tell me. I knew they get approved, but under this channel, they get approve them. But if it's a high ticket, whatever, they're going to ask for all this stuff and they're going to have a security hold. I go, why didn't you tell? My initial reaction is, why didn't you tell me that up front? But then why I didn't ask the right question. I didn't communicate them. I didn't tell them, hey, we can't risk this going to this second phase. And he goes, well, if you would have told me that, then I would have told you, no, let's not send it here. So by not explaining the outcome, the end result, I just say, hey, if we can get it approved, get it approved. But I want to make sure this doesn't happen. That again, taking responsibility. I didn't blame them. Oh, how could you do this? So they need their money back. You're holding this security. That's just their policy. I had to say, no, that's on us. We didn't communicate enough. So that causes you to always come back to you. What did we learn? What did I learn from that situation when it comes to communication?
Yes. And then figuring out how can we make sure we don't do this again. That's what it sounds like going forward. It sounds like you're introspective on a lot of this stuff, right? Like, I shared all those compliments for you as a speaker, but it sounds like, and I guess, can you talk about that, the importance of being introspective as a leader? That seems like it's really what drives you to get better.
I think it's number one. I think when you always, what I call ask the question behind the question or take on responsibility or the buck stops here, what could I have done differently? Why, always taking responsibility is I think the number one trait of effective leadership, because it does cause you and it takes the pressure off. I like having the pressure on me and not putting blame on other people, because then if I think somebody else is at fault, it causes you to become angry towards that person or look at that person. When you take it on, when you accept responsibility, and even if technically it's not my fault, I didn't go out and do this and this. They made a decision, but I'm the person that hired this person. I'm the person that have this on my team. Obviously, they don't know how important it is. So I think that sort of taking on responsibility is the number one key trait of being an effective leader.
Yeah, my old boss said, even if you're just 1% responsible for what went wrong, you take responsibility,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Like there's no downside to overcorrecting on it. So, all right. So, Dan, I'm going to ask you more about communication strategies, but before we move on, thanks for sharing your communication mistake. And again, anybody from the Northwestern High School who attended the 1992 basketball banquet in Albion, Pennsylvania, my apologies for stepping in it and calling indirectly calling your team awful. So, all right. So let's talk communication strategies and tactics. You mentioned several of them during your Retail Now 2025 presentation. So you listed 8 steps to a powerful presentation. I want to pull out some of those steps and have you expand on some of those. So step number 1 was establish credibility and trust. So what do you see as the most effective way to communicate that? And it's not the old, come on, you can trust me, like, look at me. So how do you establish credibility and trust with somebody?
Well, this one's the easiest. It's not difficult. All you have to do is tell the truth when you go in and talk to a person. Prospects can tell, again, when somebody is phony or painting a bright picture. Just just explain who you are, who your company is, how long you've been around, how many customers you serve. I like to show pictures of our office, a building. If I have a new sales rep, I want that sales rep to go in and say, "Hey, I'm brand new." So being transparent builds credibility in the customer's eyes. Don't try to be somebody you're not. So building credibility and trust is simply going in. Jim, before I get into my demonstration here, why don't I just tell you a little bit about who we are and what we do, and answer any questions you might have. Does that sound good? Okay, well, let me tell you a little bit about our company. We started the company back in 1999. We've actually been around for about 20 years. And the good news is we have right now established over 500 similar companies like you in this area that we service. And we do that and just go on and explain how long you've been around, what you do. Then if you're a brand new company, when I didn't have anything, I'm a reseller. So whatever I'm reselling, I also focus in on their credibility. Like my first product was a product called Dinerware. And I was brand new. I never sold point of sale software, but I had to go out into my first few restaurants and try to build credibility. So now my company, I come from the card side, so I've been in business for a while, but I spent focus talking about Dinerware's credibility. Now Dinerware started back, and this is when their focus was in restaurants. In fact, the founder was a chef, and then so I built credibility into the reseller. So find out where the most credible aspects are of whatever you're selling or your business, and simply explain it, let the person know. And you always do this before you start asking questions about their business.
Got it. And so you do that because you establish that credibility first, so then it makes them a little bit more open, and you've got credibility established. Is that what you're saying? Like, you've got to establish that from the get-go.
When salespeople come in to sell me stuff in my office, and they come into my office and start asking me everything about how much money I make, how many employees I have, things about me and my business, who are you? But I'm much more apt to give them those answers if they sort of, open up their lingerie drawer before they look into mine.
Yes, I remember prospecting at a trade show one time and asking the person, I want to learn more about your product and how you go to market. And he's like, why would I tell you how we're going to go to market? I'm like, oh,
Right.
well, let me explain where I'm from. Like, I'm with an independent association, things of that nature. Like, oh, okay, I get that. So, yeah, you got to get the credibility first. So, and one way, if we can pause for a quick commercial break, to build credibility is to be a member of the RSPA, the Retail Solution Providers Association. It's North America's, I'm building up the credibility of the RSPA, North America's largest community of retail technology, VARs, software providers, vendors, and distributors. To accelerate your success through an RSPA membership, email membership@gorspa.org. Also, thanks to these companies who support the RSPA community and make this podcast and video series possible. Our platinum sponsors, Blue Star. Our gold sponsors are Epson, Heartland ScanSource, and organization you might be familiar with, COCARD. Thank you for your support of the RSPA. Finally, make sure you save the date for Inspire 2026, the Retail IT Channel's premier leadership conference. RSPA Inspire is set for February 1st through 4th on the island of Kauai in Hawaii. For more information, visit gorspa.org/inspire so you can experience networking Nirvana. All right. So we said step number one was establish credibility and trust. Step two is questions. Understand the pain. So I'm curious, Dan, like, do you plan tailored questions in advance? Do you have a list of standard questions that you typically draw from based on your experience? Or are you at the point now you can just read the situation, react with questions developed in the moment? What do you do? And I'm also curious, what would you recommend to our audience?
Planned questions. Now, you may expand on a couple of them if you get off, but you should know whichever niche you're in, whatever target market you're selling to, what are the common questions that you want to ask? And some of them may be when it comes to their product, tell me a little bit about your current program today, your current software, whatever it is, what do you like most about it? And if you had to change anything about it, what would that be? That could be for any one of your prospects. We also like to ask questions to learn a little bit more about the decision-making process. Who besides yourself would make the final decision when it comes to something like this? I always like the first question out of the gate is, tell me a little bit about your company. I know I've been on your website. I know what you do here, but Jim, tell me, how did you start this business? Tell me tell me how long have you been around? How did you get into this business in the first place? And sit back and listen. Because now you're building relationship skills. When it comes to building that trust and credibility, you want to build rapport. So if you're sincerely curious about how people started a business, I'm fascinated by entrepreneurs or people that took over their parents' business and turned it into something else. It's really interesting being in the profession we're in that we get to go out and visit with all these independent business owners and figure out, I'm just curious, how did you get into this business? Tell me a little bit about that. It has nothing to do with me selling you anything. That's building rapport. So that's kind of one of the first questions out of the gate. Oh, really? So right now you built this. So how many employees do you have? Okay, how many tables? So right now you have how many stations? Then get into the detail, of some of those detailed questions, but build that rapport right out of the gate.
Yeah, and it seems like there's seeking to understand, not seeking to understand just for the sole intent of selling them, right? Having genuine curiosity with somebody.
And listening skills. See, there's two things I recommend when it comes to asking questions. You just can't be a robot and have these written down questions. You open up your thing, go, now, Jim, how much revenue do you do every year? And how many employees do you have? I use two things. I use what is called bridges in the beginning and then listening skills at the end of each question. Bridges are, Jim, let me ask you this, or Jim, I'm curious, or do you mind if I ask? So those are bridges in between each questions. But before that, at the end of the questions, I'm always nodding whenever they're talking. You're looking them straight in the eye. That's the other thing. You got to look them straight in the eye, listening skills, nodding your head, and taking in their information. Yeah, got it. I understand. Okay, I hear you. Oh, interesting. Oh, wow. Okay, great. Well, Jim, let me ask you this. So those are all listening skills that they know you're taking in the information. And then even though I know what question I'm going to ask, I'm curious, Jim, how did you get started in this business anyway? So always using those are communication skills. Those are effective communications, listening skills, taking in their information. Don't jump in and ask the question right when they're done asking. Oh, wow. Yay, wow, that's fascinating. Interesting. Very interesting. Well, let me ask you this, Jim. How many total employees do you currently have here? So those are all part of the whole effective communication skill building.
Yeah, I call that. So like I train people on moderating panels and things like that. So I talk about high school moderation, or you're talking about like high school sales. My first question is, tell me about your business. And then no matter what the person says, my next question is, right, it sounds like you're saying you've got to be able to have that genuine curiosity and pick up on their cues. And if they say something that's interesting, then you're going to go chase that down to make it conversational. That's what it sounds like is a big part of leadership. Isn't just asking the right questions or saying the right things. It really is that how you're saying the rapport that you build with somebody, if I'm understanding that correctly.
And Jim, if you do that, you find yourself actually learning about other people's business and liking your job so much better. People would ask me when I was out in the field doing sales, what do you like most about your job? I go, I love learning about how all these other businesses operate, how they got started, how they built their business.
Yeah.
That to me is gratifying. It's a sincere curiosity, and I get to learn all these different types of businesses and how they survived in this crazy world we have, competitive
Yeah.
world.
Yeah.
It's,
And you realize it's not a linear path. A lot of people, it's not like I went to school for this and then I got into this. It's somehow they shoehorned or serendipity really found them, is what it sounds like.
that's
Very
right.
good. All right. So the final step that you have in your process is the next step close. And so I guess I'll share with you for folks who are like, what do you mean by next step close? The RSPA has adopted your next step close. Dan, we've been talking about with John Gregg, our business development director. We're testing it out. And so the next step close would be at the end of the conversation. Here's the RSPA's version. Let me tell you what the next step is if you're considering joining the RSPA, which it appears that you are. You can fill out a membership application. It would take you maybe 5 minutes on your end. Why don't we at least get that started? Is that fair? So I guess judge me on our next
Wow.
step. On our
You
next.
you nailed it. Wow, you're a great learner.
Well, thank you. I was taking notes feverishly when you were talking at Retail Now. So that is our next step close that we're trying out. And because we do a lot of these video, we're able to just drop the link into the chat and go, here it is. Here's the
Yeah.
application. You click on that, you've got it. You just send that on over to us. So talk about that's how you do it. Can you share with our audience the importance of that,
Yes.
right? Clarifying at the end of the conversation where everything stands and then agreeing on how it's going to move forward.
Yes. You know, back when I was first trained in sales by a gentleman by the name of Tom Hopkins, he wrote the book How to Master the Art of Selling. You know, there was a lot of different what they call closing techniques and closing the sale. A lot of them were somewhat manipulative, but what I learned over the years of becoming more of a consultative sales approach and combining a lot of those skills of questioning skills, a lot of them were just asking questions. But when it comes down to closing the sale, it really made it simple when I learned one close that you can use pretty much in every product, every service, no matter what you're doing. And it really is not, I don't even like to call it a close. What it is at the end of every presentation, what we get into is we have the fear. The fear is the prospect is afraid of making a decision that backfires. You know, we've all made purchase decisions that we regret. So they have this fear of making a bad decision. And they also don't know how to buy. We have a salesperson who's afraid of losing the sale or afraid of them saying no, and they don't want to lose a sale. So when you have two people having this fear, the fear of the prospect making a bad decision or not knowing how to buy, the fear of the salesperson not making the sale and losing the commission. And so what typically happens is the owners who are drivers, egos, want to take control of the sales conversation. So they'll say, oh, great, Jim, thank you. You've done a great job. It was a great demo. Why don't I do this? Why don't you give me a call next week? I'm going to talk to my partners. I'm really excited about this. It all looks good. Why don't you send me over? In fact, why don't you get me over a proposal? Send it over to me. I'll show it to my partners and then follow up with me next week and we can go from there. And what do we say as salespeople? Oh, great. Yes, we want to say yes. You know, we're yes, yes, I can do that. Yes, I can get that proposal together. Yes. And then we go back to the office and they say, how did it go? Oh, it was great. I got a hot one. I think we're going to get it. You know, I'm going to go look at my new car right now. I'm looking at ordering this new car, get this commission. So, and then a week goes by and, you know, we try to get a hold of the person. I got this proposal. Well, I haven't talked to the owner. I've got a lot going on. My business is going here. So the bottom line is this. You need to jump them. You need what I call beat them to the punch and simply explain to them what it takes for them to own your product or service. It's not that difficult. So as soon as you're done presenting your proposal, what it is you presented to the prospect, once they received all the information, before they want to take the ball and tell you, you got to say, now, Jim, let me just tell you what the next step is. If this is something you're at least considering, which it looks like you are, right? Because you have to get that confirmation first. And that's what you did in your presentation. That's why I was so impressed. You have to get a confirmation. Well, yeah, I guess I'm considering. Who wouldn't be considering it if they went through all these you could be on your third, fourth call with this company at this point. It's time to explain to them what it takes for them to own and simply go through the steps. Well, let me tell you what the next step is. And then walk through step by step what it takes for them to buy. If you're selling point of sale software, it could look something like this. The next step is, well, the next step is to fill out what we call the paperwork or the application. I never say the word contract, okay? But make sure that paperwork and that agreement is non-binding.
Yeah.
You're just needing, the hardest part is to get a signature or to get that paperwork started. But so make that a no risk, no obligation opportunity. So you simply explain, we just have some simple paperwork. It takes me about 5 minutes. I just need to get some basic information from you, and then I'll submit it. I'll get the paperwork. That takes me a couple days to get approval. Then I'm going to call you back, Jim. The next step after that is that, you can tell us, you talked to your partner, you thought it over, whatever. Let's go forward to get your confirmation to set up what we call our installation date. And in between that, we're going to build your menus. We're going to come out and do this. We're going to set up an installation date where we're going to come out and install everything for you. And then we're going to set up a time to go live. This whole process, the next step then would be we'd come out and train your people and go live. This whole process could take 30 days. Now, I want you to know, Jim, if during those 30 days, something happens, you have a change of heart, no hard feelings, nothing,
Yeah.
But, so since this is something you're considering, and since there's no cost or obligation to at least get that paperwork started, why don't we at least get started with that? Does that sound fair? So that whole last sentence you said, Jim, why don't we at least get started with that? Does that sound fair? That is a very soft close, if you want to call it a close. It's very hard for them. They've got to now come up with reason. I don't want to say this is manipulative, but they now have to think to themselves as an owner, why wouldn't I want to do it? Well, what's the risk? Every owner wants to think about risk, or every decision maker, it's all about risk. I guess why? I can't come up with a reason, Jim, why I wouldn't want to at least do that if I've sat with you this far. So that's sort of the process. That's how I came up with it. I don't have to teach my salespeople 22 different. I want to think it over. The Benjamin Franklin close, my dear old mother close. So it's just that's the only close you need to know in sales.
Yes. And what I like about it is, like, me as a salesperson, I don't want to be pushy and I don't want to be manipulative. And also for their end, I don't want to be pushed and I don't want to be manipulated. And again, the audience that I guess the RSPA has, that probably a lot of our other that RSPA members also have, is right, like independent business owners, entrepreneurial, they don't want to be told what to do. And so this is that's what I guess what I really liked about it is your next step close. It's you setting the terms of the next steps, but without being pushy or manipulative, right? You're getting them to say, yeah, that seems fair.
Well, it's an educational close. You're just simply educating them on the process of what it takes for them to own whatever. They don't know how to buy. They don't know how the process. You gotta educate them on the processes of what it would take for them to own whatever it is you're selling.
Yeah. Well said. I have a couple more questions for you, Dan, in the time that we have left. And again, thanks for presenting at Retail Now. That was super helpful for me. It's helpful for our team, and I know for our members, we heard a lot of positive feedback on it as well. So I want to get your take on a leadership communication principle that I think is important, and I want to hear if you feel it's important and how you execute on it. And the principle is, people who work for them, right, who you're leading, the people work for them or with them feel that they are in the information loop. I'm curious, how do you do that with your team, right? And what have you found to be the most successful ways of keeping your people in the loop without sharing, secrets that you shouldn't have, or without overwhelming them with too much information? What do you do to keep your team in the information loop?
There's two things I think about in that situation. One is don't be afraid to be transparent with when it comes to the behind the scenes numbers. Like my staff knows my P&Ls, I'm not afraid to tell them our gross revenues, our net revenues, so they understand, because that comes in handy too when business is tough or business is down. I was getting into a communication skill when it comes to percentage, when it comes to commission percentage, and whether it be, 10%, 20%, 50%. However, when I explained to that, when I showed the transparency, hey, I just want you to know, Jim, if I pay you this percentage, you're actually making more money than me on every sale. They go, wait a minute, I'm only making, 20% commission. You're making 80%. I go, well, wait a minute. Let me show you my expenses. My margin on that, my profit margin is only 15%, and you're making 20%. So you don't have any risk. So you would be making, so once they see that, then
Yeah.
now they're not saying, oh, you're making this and I'm making this. Being transparent, it's in your benefit to be transparent, and don't be afraid. Oh, I don't want them to see how much money I'm making, or people want to work for successful people. So I'm not afraid to show them when business is good, and when, now you might say, well, they're going to ask for a raise, or they see how much money you're making. I've never had a situation where I showed our P&Ls, or just in rough what our profits are for the year, or quarterly income. Pretend you're a public company where
Right.
everything is transparent. And that's number one, is don't be afraid to be transparent with your people that you want to, be with for a long time, and have for a long time. They feel like they have an ownership at stake too. And number two, don't be afraid to tell them the big picture. I always communicate what the end game is, what the big picture is. People feel like they're in the loop if they know what the future, what your future, what you're thinking, Mr. President, Mr. Owner. I'm part of this, but what is your vision down the road? Where are we going long term? If they feel they're in the loop and knowing what the vision is, then that to me keeps them in this loop. People have a feeling like they know we're all part of this together. So that's two things. Don't be afraid to be transparent, and never be afraid to let people know what that big picture is.
Thank you for that. And the big picture reminds me of the two bricklayers. And one's like, what do you do? I'm a bricklayer. And the other one says, what are you doing? I am building the world's greatest cathedral, right? Because he sees the end in mind. How
That's a
often
good.
do you talk, like with your team, about the big picture? Because to me, there's a thing of where sometimes people are like, I'm interested in your big picture. You're interested in the
Yeah.
RSPA's big picture. But a lot of times folks are like, I'd just like to do my job. I don't need to hear,
Yeah.
about the big picture every day. Like, how
No,
do you,
it
what are your thoughts on that?
you do it when the opportunity opens itself up. I had one of my key employees come into my office today talking about how this conversion is going that we're doing, and and so the opportunity said, I said, this is great, because let me tell you what the future is here. What our goal is. Our goal is by next year we want to get here, because so you wait for the opportunity. The opportunity will come to you. You don't have this, okay, I'm going to meet with on every Wednesday, I'm going to meet with somebody and talk about the big picture. Just when the opportunity presents itself, expand on it, and always, let that person know, here's the reason why this is so important, because down the road, this is where we're going, and this is where we need to get to. So I would say I have no plan in place as to how often I do it. I just do it when the opportunity presents itself.
Got it. Where it seems like it's natural to bring it to the
Yes,
conversation as opposed
yes,
to this thing. So, all right.
yes.
Last question for you, Dan. So we've covered a ton today. I'm curious, what would be your final advice for our audience related to leadership and communication? Like, let's say you have a 3-minute ride share with a small business leader, and they're like, Dan, what would be your best advice for me on leadership and communication?
Try to become a flexible thinker. Effective leaders are flexible thinkers. Think about being a spouse. a good husband, I can speak it from a male, is you have to be a flexible thinker to stay married a long time. Okay. So when I say flexible thinker as a leader, don't be afraid of dissent. I think good leaders look forward to having difference of opinions. The more narrow-minded you are, the less effective you're going to be as a leader. So I would give the advice of really try to not be the smartest person in the room. Be okay with other people being smarter than you, taking in information, never being afraid to change your mind, but with input. So, I sit on a board. And I have sat on a board where, as a chairman, we have different personalities, and I keep getting voted in as the chair. I think because of that flexibility of being able to take in, even if I have a strong opinion on something, and then somebody else, disagrees with me. I don't want to fight that. I don't want to prove you're wrong, I'm right, and get in this big debate. I really use those listening skills and look at it from their shoes. How are they saying that, and taking in that information, and never being afraid to say, you know what? I think you're right.
Mm-hmm.
I think you're right. So that becoming a flexible thinker, number one, and number two, be true to yourself. Don't try to be somebody you're not. If you're not a player's coach, as I would say, a motivator, a big talker, don't try to fake it. You don't have to be. Just be who you are as a leader.
Exactly. Very well said. Well, that does it for this episode of The Trusted Advisor. If you enjoyed our discussion, be sure to subscribe to the RSPA YouTube channel and the Trusted Advisor podcast so you never miss an episode. Before we go, big thanks again to Dan Brattland for sharing his wisdom with us today. Thanks also to RSPA Marketing Director Chris Arnold for his production work, Joseph McDade for our music, and last but not least, thanks so much to you for listening. Our goal at the RSPA is to accelerate the success of our members in the retail technology ecosystem by providing knowledge and connections. For more information, please visit our website at gorspa.org. Thanks for listening, and goodbye, everybody.